Welcome everybody, this is the new format of the Leo Zagami Show. Illuminati News, Illuminati Confessions celebrates 20 years. This has been a very long adventure, and of course many of you don't know how this whole thing was born. So I'm here this year not only to report on the latest news, and of course my monologue today is gonna be dedicated to the latest events, propaganda, power, and the absurdity of the new world order that we have all seen played out in the last few hours. However, these confessions that from volume 1 all the way to volume 12. It's been a long adventure, and it actually started before it was put on paper on the internet in 2006. So 20 years of Illuminati Confessions. 20 years ago, I started my first blog. It was quickly picked up by people like David Icke and others. And so I started also this regular presence in Greg Zismansky's Arctic Beacon. Then in 2009, also thanks to my present wife, the great Christy, who is also involved in running Cursum Perficio, we published the first Illuminati Confessions in Japan, out of all places in the world. But the story behind these confessions is really what we're going to be discussing in the second part of today's show. So please stay with me. And now, of course, let's discuss the latest events, which also fit with Illuminati Confessions Volume 1, the whole truth about the Illuminati and the New World Order. What I'm talking about is this New World Order, which I will call the Rees New World Order, and I will explain you why in a second. Trump takes Venezuela, Putin will keep what is left of Ukraine, and China will absorb Taiwan. The decisions are already made. So for all those people who are following us in the various platforms today, remember to not be fooled by the ideology, the vidi et impera. No, just chill out, everybody. Putin is going to keep Ukraine, because you have a common factor here. A requirement for all these superpowers is to become involved with the new technology, and the new technology requires, of course, these rare minerals, this rare earth, which you can find in Ukraine. And you remember, Zelensky, in fact, wanted to make a deal with Trump regarding the rare earth. But of course, now this deal will not be possible because it seems really unstoppable. Putin, in any case, we saw in the last few hours Maduro losing his seat of power in Caracas just after receiving a special envoy by Xi Jinping. This is all about the absurdity of this new world order. Remember, guys, they are like gangsters. Each wants their own piece of the cake. So it has to be very clear here. There's no ideology on top. There is just interest. And the interest I'm talking about this time have, of course, the interest of Donald J. Trump, who launched this large-scale military operation early this morning, successfully capturing President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, who are now on their way or already in New York. Then later on in this press conference in Mar-a-Lago, Trump brought up with a lot of emphasis the Monroe Doctrine, which is very important because it's a long-standing US foreign policy that wasn't really used in the new century, was still in place in the 20th century and characterized all the various coups and Operation Condor in South and Central America. We have the Monroe Doctrine, which is basically the US dominance in the Western Hemisphere and the opposition to any foreign interference in the Americas. At the time, of course, of President Monroe, in the early 19th century, it was about European powers interfering with the United States. Now it's China, now it's Russia, and nobody could have imagined a few hours ago when the Chinese arrived in the presidential palace of Maduro, this great change.
Verte. Me traes muy buenos recuerdos. Feliz año.
Feliz año nuevo.
Este es el año del caballo, ¿verdad, Salvador? Usted es caballo.
Soy tigre.
Yo soy tigre. Tú. Tanto tiempo. Yo lo conocí a él muy joven. Muy joven. Hace 20 años. Hace 20 años que lo conocí. Como traductor cuando estaba el presidente conquistado.
Exactamente, sí.
Ahora es director. Qué increíble, ¿verdad? Como pasa el tiempo. Estás igual.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society.
Illuminati News.
Free and independent.
Welcome to our free and independent Illuminati News. 20 years of being here on the internet in trying to explain that all political factions are controlled, and still there is people who think there is something called democracy, or we have to bring the democracy to Venezuela. How idiotic that sounds. We have to bring the democracy to Venezuela. Yeah, sure. Democracy doesn't really exist. It's an illusion in the first place, but the only republic which, of course, has this great constitution that at least gives us the possibility of a First Amendment, the opportunity to talk to you freely, at least until now, is here, the United States of America. We are in a time of tribulation. We are in a time of transformation. When I started my project Illuminati Confessions on the internet, I talked about China being the model for the future New World Order. And in fact, as you know, from volume 7 and then volume 9, I started to talk a lot about the fact that there was this Sino-Russian New World Order that is coming together. This world is organized in a way by these gangsters, these warlords, in a way that now it's obvious. I mean, Trump might have been credible in the first presidency, I personally don't find him credible in the second presidency. Now, America First, like I said on the old Leo Zagami show with my wife Christy already a month ago, well, I mean, the fact that America First is about not waging wars that are not created out of absolute necessity. Instead, Trump just goes to Venezuela. He knows, though, something. He knows there's something that nobody's talking about at the moment. And I've discussed it today in an article you can find on leozagami.com. This is the article. And please go and check it out, because I explain what nobody's talking to you about at the moment. There is not only oil in Venezuela. That's, of course, very important. There is also something else, rare earth. Rare earth is present on the border between Venezuela and Colombia. And in that forsaken land filled with warlords and guerrillas and whatnot, well, that is where the interest of a lot of nations reside at the moment. So aside from the oil, there is the rare earth element that is not really being discussed at all. And we will see what's going to happen in the coming weeks and months. Trump has basically said that the control of Venezuela is in the hands of the United States of America. Here we are really viewing then something of an old school approach, intervening, I must say, in a very fast way. Fortunately, no servicemen died, but there was this almost chirurgical, surgical intervention that is typical of the artificial intelligence. I mean, you must understand that now, today, when it comes to war kind of scenarios, intelligence operation, they are always conducted with the aid of artificial intelligence. But having said this, this interest for artificial intelligence is also the interest for a new economy that can be carried on only if you have certain rare earths that, like we said earlier, could be found also in Ukraine. It seems like Ukraine is a lost cause, but at the same time, the fact that the Chinese were with Maduro, and now the Chinese might even still be there in Caracas to witness all this, this important envoy of Xi Jinping. What does it mean? It means that now they have the excuse they needed, the green light, to take on Taiwan. So it's a bit like, three gangsters getting together and saying, okay, what are you taking? I mean, Putin takes Ukraine. We know that China wants Taiwan, and then you have Trump, who is given the possibility of taking over Venezuela. So this is the plan, which might extend also to Cuba. But Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered this speech for 2026, where he stated very clearly his intentions for the reunification of mainland China with Taiwan. So this is the New World Order. The New World Order is about interest, and I repeat, they are not ideological or even political interests. So beware, because critics and skeptics of President Trump's decision will be inevitably labeled. Different labels will be designed to shut people like myself down, to discredit the fact that I'm questioning what is going on. Remember, we were not allowed to question the vaccine and Operation Warp Speed started by Trump. And we were labeled conspiracy theorists for simply asking valid questions upon the arrival of these vaccines. And then you had also, people who after a while had valid questions also regarding the genocide in Gaza, because that's what it became. Because as soon as you say something, you're labeled anti-Semitic. And this happened in both the Biden as well as the Trump era. And at the same time, you were not even allowed to criticize the war in Ukraine, because you will be immediately labeled pro-Putin. Now, fast forward all this to where we are now. The narco-terrorist Maduro. He has fabrics of cocaine. Yeah, sure. And this is the current narrative of the Trump administration. I mean, it doesn't mean that I am in favor of Maduro. Maduro is a communist scumbag. But the problem is that anyone questioning what is going on now will be labeled a communist lover, when instead this is a strategic game which is consciously played by the superpowers of the New World Order to achieve their goals, to obtain oil, to obtain those rare earth material for their electric vehicles, their turbines, fighter jets, everything that has to do with the defense budgets, which are growing, and the military industrial complex and all the material they need also for this new economy. We have, of course, a big transformation of our society that requires those rare earths. Here you have Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is really heading this transformation. He knows that he has a very steady ally in Vladimir Putin. And so I have always said from the very start of my confessions 20 years ago that the future of the Illuminati, the future of the elites, was with the Chinese model. And I've been proved totally correct. Now, how did this project of mine come together? Because I was involved, as you know, in secret societies we commonly refer to as the Illuminati. I was involved with the intelligence agencies. I was involved with powerful lodges, lodges of not so called the regular Freemasonry, but rather irregular Freemasonry, but much more influential. The Illuminati was something that also was kind of coming back with Giuliano Di Bernardo in the early 2000s. And before that, in 1999, I had created the Ordo Illuminatorum Universalis. We were living a very different world, but in the end, the world had changed already after the fall of the Soviet Union, after the end of the Cold War, and nobody would have still imagined the power of present-day China, because, like I wrote in this book, there was a very different idea. But people like Kissinger maybe did a big mistake, or maybe they willingly did that mistake. Let's not forget that George Bush Sr. and Barbara Bush were actually in Beijing in the early 70s on behalf of the American government. And then George H. Bush would become head of the CIA. So everything is developing here. But the absurdity of this New World Order, in a way, is obvious when we see a New World Order after the Second World War, which is characterized by the dominant role of America. And now, of course, the dominant role of America is put back into question by not only China and Russia, but all the BRICS countries. I repeat, it's a positive thing to remove Maduro, but this precedent gives the possibility for Putin to make the war in Ukraine, to bring the war even to Odessa, to probably arrest and get Volodymyr Zelensky arriving in Kiev finally. I mean, now with what has happened in Caracas, in Venezuela in general, because also the surrounded areas, some of them were hit, Isla Margarita and whatnot. But I repeat, what has happened today changes forever the course of this new world order. And I'm not sure it's for the better, because now China will finally feel they can do the next step, reunite with Taiwan. I mean, the fact that China is now openly stating through Xi Jinping that the reunification of China and Taiwan is unstoppable, that he invoked the bond of blood and kinship. I mean, it's about a transformation that will then bring us to the next step. The fact that robotics and the AI in its worth, transformation into what I have defined as cyber Satan is part of this whole plan. There is for the Chinese the will to conquer and to prove their success also thanks to these new technologies. And the way that the Chinese are developing the AI is for a dystopian world, a world which is completely controlled and where we are simply numbers. Even the beautiful images that Xi Jinping can show to us about the tradition embracing modernity, well, that's not really that credible. But I repeat, you shouldn't take sides here, because on top of this whole game, they are all in it together. So that's why I started this project. When I saw between 2003 and 2006, I maturated the idea that I had to leave the Monte Carlo Lodge, which I was part of, which was part of the infamous P2 Lodge. I had to leave the Ordo Templi Orientis. I clashed with them. I clashed with other secret societies, let's say, of the Crowley milieu. And in the end, around 2005, I started to have in my head the idea, it was maturing this idea in my head that I had to write down everything in a book series. It wasn't though until 2006, in June 2006, when I actually found myself literally threatened by these people that we commonly refer to as the Illuminati, that I decided, when Ezio Giunchia from this Monte Carlo Lodge told me that there were some people in the lodge who wanted to whack me, to kill me, I said, okay, this is the time to make everything public before they will get rid of me. So now you are following me, and I notice, I mean, we are like maybe 150 people in live. It's not a big number of people. Think about it. I've been around since 2006. At the time, there was only maybe David Icke, Alex Jones, Jordan Max. I mean, we were literally a bunch of people you could count on one hand who were talking about these subjects. And now, after 20 years, we have a variety of podcasters, of shows, ever so popular, with millions of followers. But unfortunately, the censorship, the fact that the system has always been scared. I remember that in 2009, I started to publish my books in Japan. Then we wanted to publish them in the English language, but it would take another 6 years to get to publish my first book in the English language. And of course, today, as we are talking about, aside from the propaganda, power, and absurdity of this new world order, which we are seeing, already in the first days of 2026, turning towards a very ugly possible scenario in the near future, well, it's important for me to make you understand my own work, because I have been part of this exposure on the internet for so many years, and my books, of course, have also played their part. 12 books. This was the last book of this installment. And now, of course, I have also the book on Jeffrey Epstein, which is currently my bestseller. The Rise and this is The Rise and Fall of Frankie's Monster. Definitely a book you should get. I finished my confessions, but now I am celebrating 20 years of these confessions. 20 years of these confessions online, 20 years of these confessions that then in 2009 were first published in Japanese. Then in 2012, I finally managed to publish them in the Italian language. And it was a big success. And it was a big success, but then when the system realized that these books were not simply some literary work, but they contained secret material. I mean, the interesting thing of Volume 1 is it's not easy to read, but it contains a lot of internal documents about the theory and typology of the secret societies, about the way the secret society phenomenon operates, how the various societies with a secret form, societies with a secret objective, secret societies that are part of the occult, pan-finalist society. I mean, secret societies is a variety of different objectives that are codified and then transmitted to an elite. And each moves in unison with this new world order. Now, when I published my first volume, which in Italy became a bestseller and also in Japan, my idea was to pick up these documents, which I was entrusted with when I was part of the Monte Carlo Lodge of the Illuminati, when I was part of also other secret societies, which I got involved with, the Società Rosicruciana in Anglia versus the Ordo Templi Orientis. Then I was also part of Freemasonry, as you know, in various forms, even a brief participation to regular Freemasonry in the United Lodge of England. Now, I collected a lot of internal documents, a lot of material, also on these monsters of the occult, on the current occult war, and I published this first book. I acknowledge the fact that it's a rather complex book filled with names, and the fact that it's more of a manual than the classical essay. So, Volume 12, it's more of an essay, but this is something that people need to read so they can get the basis. They can finally realize what the Illuminati are, because you have, of course, Illuminati in fiction, Illuminati in literature with Dan Brown, that's fiction. You have the Illuminati all over the internet that you can find, often Nigerian scammers selling you some diplomas. By the way, I want to say hello to my old friend from Great Britain, Jason Liosatos, who is with us today, following us on the Facebook platform. I want to say hello to Interlord, who is complimenting me for the article on liosagami.com. And of course, I want to thank all the people who are tuned in to this live show, and also the thousands of people who are going to watch us in the in the coming days. So this new format that I have announced last week and I'm starting this week might have also some improvements, but one thing is for sure: we are trying to offer you also a testimony of 20 years of my work here on the internet. Thousands of interviews, then also followed from 2009 onwards with my literary projects, which eventually were published in the English language from 2015 onwards, the year in which I also started a collaboration that lasted 7 years with Alex Jones, and InfoWars, and then, of course, collaboration with many other people before that, because in the very early stages, when 2006, I guess, was a long time ago, we had the radios on the internet that were kind of, they were quite popular, and these radios on the internet were a way to finally bypass the censorship, give these interviews might last hours on certain topics that were never discussed on mainstream radios. Like I said earlier, it was a very different time. But I collected material from 2005, 2006, especially when I had a real confrontation with these people between 2003 and 2006 that culminated in me leaving all these secret societies. I kept a presence after in Freemasonry and managed to bring out, though, a group of people with me for this Ordo Illuminatorum Universalis, which I mentioned here in the prologue of my book, which was founded in 1999. And we reawaken also a Masonic order called the Strict Temple of Servants, but that's something I will discuss when I discuss Volume 3. I mean, of course, I'm not going to be able to go in every single details of my books, but definitely in Volume 1 you have the infiltration, for example, of the OTO in Freemasonry, how all the Crowellites, Satanists, Luciferian, Gnostics, however you want to define them, have infiltrated British Freemasonry and then the rest of global Freemasonry. My books were about bringing out of the realm of conspiracy theories these subjects, giving them some credibility, also at an academic level. It was about bringing these subjects with proper sources. And I tell you, these books also, of course, created some problems, even for my first publisher here in the United States of America. Imagine that Volume 2 is a book that for some reason wasn't allowed in the prison systems in a state like Arizona. I don't know why they have this problem. But then also Volume 2, which we will discuss maybe soon, is also a book that was exposing Satanists that also came after me and my publisher. I never back down when it comes down to attempts of censorship, and I have continued my work, as you know, after the trilogy and after Pope Francis the Last Pope and Invisible Master. I started to publish the rest of the Confession series on my own, with my wife, with the Cursum Perficio publishing house we have created, that then moved from Europe here to Palm Springs, California. Many people have found these books useful. These books are definitely showing you the infinite tentacles behind the so-called Illuminati of the New World Order. For those who like to debunk conspiracy theories, they simply say the Illuminati, was an order that existed briefly with Adam Weishaupt, 1776. Already in the 1780s, they had to dismiss the whole thing because they were exposed. Now, that's only partly true, because in reality, the system created by the Illuminati order that was heavily influenced also by the Jesuits, and the fact that they were really influential also behind events of great importance like the French Revolution. This means the Illuminati were a reality. Of course, the historians would like to dismiss the whole thing once Weishaupt was forced into a corner though the whole thing was simply transformed using other names, creating other orders, even clubs, and like, for example, the Bohemian Club. This is their infamous symbol. But at the same time, in this book, I've showed you also documents of my own personal involvement. I recall my own personal experiences with all these people, or at least with some of them. And I think that nowadays there is an oversimplification out there of the various podcasters who touch on these subjects. So I wanted to really be able to dig deeper. And so, aside from the current news, which is very important, we will continue with Illuminati news to talk about things like what has happened in Venezuela, what is going to happen maybe in Iran. We have talked about that also in the past, a possible return of the Pahlavi. Then we have Mamdani, who suddenly arrives as new mayor of New York and is already complaining about the actions taken by Trump.
Called the president and spoke with him directly to register my opposition to this act and to make clear that it was an opposition based on being opposed to a pursuit of regime change, to the violation of federal international law, and a desire to see that be consistent each and every day.
And what was his response to you in that conversation?
I registered my opposition, I made it clear, and we left it at that.
Yeah, that's it. It's a clown show. He went there and Trump put down the red carpet. It's just like, I repeat, we have given Trump a chance. And it's about America. It's not about foreign wars. First of all, we need to sort out the security of the Americans, the well-being of the Americans. And instead, what is happening with the second Trump administration is really disappointing. And that's something that you will not find in Volume 1, where I initially saw, at least in the first Trump presidency, the possibility of a real change. But everybody sooner or later gets corrupted by this system. That's the problem. It's a system of very, very powerful individuals. And I've tried, of course, myself to explain in my books why these individuals are above all the political parties, above all the religions, about all the culture that we have. They are the ones who foment the new so-called cultural phenomena. And then still, it seems like in 2025, still to this day, people don't realize the importance of this elite that rules us. It continues to rule all of us, despite of the internet, despite of the criticism that we can give here. And that's one of the reasons why my channels and this show is followed by a small group of people after 20 years and not millions of people. Remember, there was a time in which, of course, I was reaching many more, but then we had one channel after the other removed. There was one channel, imagine, that they gave me back without the subscribers. It was my number one channel. I had finally managed to reach 30,000 subscribers. They gave me back the channel without the subscribers, without the videos. Simply have it back, but without anything, a blank channel. And that is really what they are trying to do, to always limit what they, of course, know it's damage towards this corrupt system. The system that, of course, prefers to send you to foreign wars than really discussing what has happened with Jeffrey Epstein, what has happened on Little St. James, what has happened at the Zorro Ranch, what has happened in New York. I know, but Trump has nothing to do with it. Okay, whatever. That's not the case. Everybody who arrives at certain levels of wealth is inevitably corrupt. That's how it is, guys. And the fact that in this book, in volume 1, I also go into the practices, the weird sexual magical deviances and practices of these people. The fact that these groups are all interconnected, have all a common origins, but their practices have also to do with the spread of homosexuality, with a specific peculiar homosexual magical tradition started by Aleister Crowley, by groups that are not known by the majority of folk. There is, of course, Freemasonry involved, but Freemasonry is not the ultimate secret society. Freemasonry, like I explain in my books, is rather the victim of itself, of its secretive way of conducting things, because it becomes the ideal place to recruit people into other more nefarious secret societies. So yes, it's true that historically maybe the order of the Illuminati as we knew it from Adam Weishaupt didn't continue. But of course, upon its ashes, many phoenix, not one, were born. And that's a fact that historians don't want to admit, because it will implicate criticism upon secret societies or clubs or groups that are still in existence. Another interesting thing that, of course, I explain is the occult war. Now, let me maybe read this term, the occult war. No? What does it really mean, this occult war? Which is, I think, at least something that we can clear here. Let me. Okay. Julius Evola. Julius Evola was an Italian baron, an aristocrat, a figure of great importance within the esoteric scene, known also here in America, but also in the Anglo-Saxon world. He was actually very much a figure of the right wing. He even got involved with the Nazis. I show you who is here, Baron Julius Evola. Well, Baron Julius Evola said some very interesting things regarding the occult war. He wrote a lot of books, and he described the term occult war in the following way. The occult war is when the forces of worldwide subversion lead from behind the scenes, adopting means that almost always elude ordinary methods of investigation. The notion of an occult war, says Evola, belongs to a three-dimensional vision of history, to a history considered not according to the two-dimensional surfaces of apparent causes, events, and leaders, but otherwise depending on the third dimension of depth, of subterranean direction that retrieves the decisive forces and influence which are often not even ascribable to the simple human element, whether individual or collective, and of, quote, And that's what's gonna maybe bring us outside also of my confessions in that book I wrote, Invisible Master, which we will be commenting probably when we finish talking about my Illuminati confessions. In a way, the Illuminati confessions are an encyclopedia of this control that, I repeat, starts from here and culminates here with the all-seeing eye, which represents the Jesuit order. By studying all these books, which have hundreds of pages, and so it's, of course, going to take you a long time, only in that way you will be able to fully comprehend the complexity of the Illuminati and this new world order they are creating for the ultimate purpose of a one-world government, which wants to be a government not only of the politics, but also of the religion. It's like we are approaching that age of the Antichrist, which cyber Satan, the AI, will fully manifest. People have difficulty often in comprehending the complexity of Freemasonry, of the Illuminati, of these secret societies, because it takes time to study these things. And you cannot simply study them on a page on the internet. It takes you also books upon books upon books, and diligence study to finally understand what is behind this system, what is this invisible college of adepts, these invisible masters, secret chiefs at work. And during, of course, my work, I clashed with some of these people, like this gentleman here who now resides in Brazil, called Nicolai de Matos Fritzford, a black magician, a very dangerous one. You can still find his books on the most gruesome black magical techniques sold on the internet. An expert, just like other figures which I show in this book, like Lomailo Duquette of the OTO. I repeat, the fact that these secret societies are so complex means that the majority of people only scratch the surface. And today we are, of course, discussing all this with the current events which are becoming more and more clear, are events that will restructure the old world order that we used to call the New World Order after the Second World War. And now we, of course, have a New World Order. So it's a cyclical thing. RT, for example, the Pravda, which is a notorious Russian publication, didn't really talk about what has happened in Venezuela. While instead, Russia Today has reported the words of the Slovak PM, US attack on Venezuela proves post-World War II world order crumbling. Big and strong countries now use military force without a UN mandate, openly flouting international law, the Slovak PM has said. This is because the Sino-Russian world order is a very different thing from the American-driven world order, the one that saw for many decades Henry Kissinger at his apex. Henry Kissinger, that, as I explained in one of my confessions, is one of the main protagonists used to be, of the Bohemian Club. And along with the various Masonic, quasi-Masonic and para-Masonic factions, we have also the chivalric faction at work, The Real Priory of Zion. That is a whole chapter of volume 1 of great interest. Priory of Zion, of course, once again taken by Dan Brown for the Da Vinci Code, just as the Illuminati were taken and then fictionalized by Dan Brown for angels and demons. It's Dan Brown who has made definitely a lot of money upon these kind of subjects, but the ones who inspired him originally were people like me who sell maybe a few thousand copies of their books. In the case of the Da Vinci Code, it was inspired by the book from the work of Michael Bagent and his friends, which were, of course, very close. Michael Bagent, very close to Freemasonry, UK Freemasonry in particular, the United Lodge of England. He was also a co-founder of what then became their main regular publication. Michael Bagent died, I think, 12 years ago after suffering a brain hemorrhage, age only 65. But he had tried, together with his other friends who were co-authors of some of, let's say, some of those books that you need to get if you have never really understood where Dan Brown took all his work. Well, it took from the Messianic Legacy, it took from the Holy Grail. These books were really the books that inspired Dan Brown. And then Dan Brown was brought to court by Michael Bagent and the other authors, Richard Leigh and Harry Lincoln. But they never managed to actually, even with the lawsuit, they didn't get any money. I think that the case didn't work out for them. So Michael Bagent, Richard Leigh, and Harry Lincoln were simply people who inspired something that the course didn't see as directly connected with the plot represented in the Da Vinci Code. Anyway, in my own book, here, volume 1 of my Confessions, I have a whole chapter instead dedicated to the real Priory of Zion, which was and is, because it's still in existence. I know personally people who belong to the Priory of Zion. I know a few of them, especially in France, but even in Italy. And the Priory of Zion was a fictional creation connected, though, to secret societies which were really in existence from ancient times. But the Priory of Zion that was depicted in Dan Brown's bestseller, Da Vinci Code, never really existed. It was simply a fictional connection by a guy, Pierre Plantard, who then called himself Plantard Sinclair. And then this guy was a guy who buried fictional roots for his own supposed order. But Pierre Plantard de Sinclair was in reality an esoterist and a guy who worked within the intelligence, and he was within the intelligence and anti-communist activities of NATO, of the state behind the operation known as Gladio, that the Priory of Zion was born. So Priory of Zion exists, but it not from ancient times, but rather from immediately after the war. A group of Freemasons from two specific groups, one in particular connected to the rectified Scottish Rite, and with, of course, the fact that Pierre Plantard knew very well the history also of Bérenger Saunière, this French Catholic priest of the village of Rennes-le-Château, knew the fact that he was involved himself in Freemasonry. I mean, there was, of course, like I said, links to proper French Masonic Rosicrucian groups, but there wasn't the same, list of Grand Masters from Leonardo da Vinci to us, which is the stuff of fiction. All these orders lie about their origins, says somebody here in the chat, and I completely agree. Most of the orders, including Freemasonry, rely on mythological origins that often are simply fictional. They claim thousands of years, maybe we have been existing for thousands of years, then maybe they exist for 100, 200, 300 years. And this group, symbol of the Alpha Galates, this was the actual symbol of the group behind the Priorials. I repeat, always within the context also of the P2 in Italy, the context of anti-communism, and that the context of anti-communism brings us also to Russia, to the Knights of Malta of the Orthodox faith. Here I have one of the documents, which became, when with the arrival of communism, the fact that a lot of Russians had to exile, then it became very important for their survival to fight communism also abroad. And one of these orders also included in the anti-communist network was the Knights of Shilkshini, the Knights of Malta, not the Knights of Malta of the SMOM, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, but rather this other group, which also work with the intelligence services. Now, today we didn't have really the opportunity to go into the intelligence operations, in their intelligence recruitment, the intelligence links with the secret societies and with Freemasonry. We'll probably do it the next time. Continuing, of course, on this new format. If you like this new format, please put a like. I want to thank the sponsors: Severt Exted, Margot Rosata Minta, and Daniel Estes. I want to really thank them in a special way with an applause, because, guys, we need your sponsorship so we can bring you maybe more shows. People ask me, are you doing a lot of shows for the Italians? Yes, but those shows are sponsored, guys. So if you want more shows in the English language, you are the sponsors. You can, of course, sponsor anonymously, or you can have your name read here during the show. Today is Severt Exted, Margot Rosada Minta, Daniel Estes. Thank you so much. Thank you, grazie, as they would say in Italy. We will continue with this new format also next week. Please contact us with your impressions. If you like your books, you can also maybe, your Leo Zagami books, of course, you can maybe contact us and ask us a question about one or another subject, and we will speak again next week. Christy, of course, might be with us in the future. At the moment, we are operating alone, but remember, guys, the world is changing. And it's changing fast. So if you want to really understand what is going on behind the curtains of history, Illuminati News every week. Don't miss it.
Illuminati want my mind, soul, and my body. Secret society, trying to keep it on.
Colombia la grande.
Illuminati want my mind, soul, and my body. Secret society, trying to keep it on.